Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fabulous episode of the Killer Author Club. This afternoon, we have the one and only Paula Hawkins joining us on her pub date for her new thriller out today, The Blue Hour. We have tons to talk about, so grab your cocktail and your list of questions, and we will see you on the other side.
Welcome to the Killer Author Club. 3 best-selling authors talking about killing, of the fictional kind, with the best thriller and suspense authors in the business. Killer conversations, killer cocktails, and killer guests, with your hosts, Kimberly Bell, Heather Gutenkopf, and Kara Ruda. This is the Killer Author Club.
Hello to all our new members and to the Killer Author Club OGs online listening to our podcast. Wherever you are, we are so thrilled to welcome you to the club. I'm Killer Kimberly Bell.
And I'm Killer Heather Gutenkopf, and Killer Kara is off on an adventure, so we look forward to having her back next time.
That's right. And we are so excited to have Paula Hawkins here with us for this special episode to answer all your questions and ours about the Blue Hour. Like always, we've got tons of killer fun planned. Speaking of fun, how about some in your inbox? We have a monthly newsletter with killer bookish news, only once a month, no spam, we promise. You can sign up at killerauthorclub.com. Also, if you can't get enough of our shows, make sure to check out the Killer Postmortem, otherwise known as the After Show, which is exclusive content for the podcast. Tonight's show will be available on your favorite podcasting app starting on Friday. Links to download are on killerauthorclub.com.
Yes, and Paula Hawkins worked as a journalist for 15 years before she wrote her first novel. Born and brought up in Zimbabwe, Paula moved to London in 1989. She now splits her time between London and Edinburgh. Her first thriller, The Girl on the Train, has sold more than 23 million copies worldwide. Amazing, amazing. Okay, we have so many questions about the Blue Hour, but can you give us a brief elevator pitch for the book first?
Can. Thank you so much, first of all, for welcoming me here today. The Blue Hour is it's a psychological suspense novel. It's set on a remote tidal island off the west coast of Scotland. It's an island that's home to just one house, just one inhabitant. There's only one way out. And at one time, this island was host to an artist, a woman called Vanessa Chapman. And when the book opens, Vanessa is gone. But an exhibition of her work is taking place at a London art gallery, and a visitor to the gallery spots that there's something unusual, something rather grisly in one of her sculptures. And this opens up the mystery. Visitors come calling to the island, and people start to find out where all the bodies are buried.
So good. And so deep and dark, and we loved it. So readers, get chatty and start dropping your questions into the comments for us to ask our guest. But first of all, it's time to talk about this episode's special drink. So we killers, we love our killer cocktails and mocktails and tasty drinks. So every episode, we bring a killer cocktail to light for all of you. So our killer cocktail for tonight is the Blue Hour Sparkler. It's blue, it's cold, and I think it's perfect for this book. So Paula, can you just tell us, before we get into too much with the book, where did the title come from, the Blue Hour?
So the blue hour is that time of day when after the sun has set and there's still light in the sky, and it's that beautiful blue light. It's a time when sort of energy starts to shift and when predators move around. And it's a time when it's kind of quite easy to mistake one thing for another. And this book is all about perception, and how, not just because it's about an artist, but it's about how we perceive each other and misperceive things and misread situations. And the blue hour is a time when you might mistake one thing for another. As one of the characters said, when you might mistake a wolf for a dog. So an enemy for a friend.
Ooh,
That kind of
ooh, very intriguing.
thing.
Yes, so the drink that we have chosen for tonight, the Blue Hour Sparkler, is perfect for reading this book, and you can find all our cocktail recipes at killerauthorclub.com under the cocktail tab. So, Kimberly.
Yes. So the Killer started the Killer Author Club 2 years ago so that readers like you can interact with some of the best suspense and thriller authors in the business. Our fall lineup includes superstars like Geneva Rose, Patricia Cornwell, Benjamin Stevenson, and so many more. For dates, times, past episodes, etc., go to killerauthorclub.com. But tonight we're here to talk about The Blue Hour, Paula's brand new thriller and a GMA book club pick for the month of November. This is a book about arts, islands, missing spouses, a compelling piece of work, hard to put down. That's according to Mick Herron. The best Paula Hawkins yet by a tense and haunting mile, says Lee Child. And Danya Kukafka, author of Notes on an Execution, says, an atmospheric and marvelously twisty novel, Paula Hawkins returns with an examination of legacy, and the mountains will move to feel like we belong. Okay, Paula, obviously you are a talented and original killer, which is why we need to know the answer to your killer question. Why do you kill?
I always struggle with this question as why I'm so drawn to dark stories. I've always been like this. I've always, as a child, I liked the darkest fairy tales, and I wanted to read Agatha Christie. And I've always just been fascinated by tragedy, by trauma, by things that go wrong, and by how people recover from those things. I'm always drawn to those stories. So it just seemed like a natural fit for me I did write other things before. Romantic comedies, if you can believe it. They were not that successful, but I never felt at home there, and I felt completely at home when I'm killing people. I feel completely at home when I'm killing people.
Fictionally, we hope, right? Yeah, okay. Well, we loved it. And I feel like we need to start with the bone artwork premise, because that is just so unique and fascinating. This idea that there's this famous artwork that they discover, or someone discovers, has a human bone in it. And it's like behind this piece of glass, so you can't really take the bone out and look at it without messing everything up. How did you come up with that premise? Like, where did that idea come from?
So I knew I wanted to write about an artist, and I knew that about the artist, and I knew about the island. Those were the things I sort of started with, but I wasn't really sure how I was going to sort of make the story out of it. I was intrigued by those things, but I always thought that the artist would make work from things that she found. That was just an idea I had, that she would find things and that she would make work from it. So that's not the only thing she does. She paints and she does other things, but I like the idea of her like walking on the beach, walking in the woods, picking things up and creating work out of them. And it seemed bones are a kind of thing that you find in the woods, animal bones usually. So she finds a bone, and she presumably thinks it's an animal bone, and she makes something out of it. But then the moment I started thinking about bone, the idea was there, because you immediately have that connection. And I read this article which was talking about how easy it is to mistake deer bones, deer ribs, in fact, for human ribs, that they look very, very similar to people who don't know very much about bones, to the layperson. And it was just that thing where it was like, oh yeah, that works. That's the perfect way. And if I want to write about art and an artist, this is the perfect way to talk about that in the context of a murder mystery.
So good. So good. And I mean, what a perfect place for a murder, but a remote island. Is Eris based on a real place? Is it real?
Well, it's not a real place, and it's not based on anywhere specific. I went on holiday years ago because I think about my sort of settings and characters for ages before I actually write about them. But I was on holiday in France, actually, in Brittany, and I was walking there along the coast, and there are lots of these little tidal islands. So islands that are cut off from the land only when the tide is high, and then when the tide goes out, you can walk across. and I was walking on the sand, and I remember looking at one of these little islands, and it just had one house, one tiny lonely house on it. And I felt that feeling, you know, when all the hair stands up at the back of your neck, and I was like, oh, that's so perfect, because it was this beautiful remote location, and it had those kind of locked room possibilities because you could get trapped on this island when the tide came in. So I could immediately see that it would be a great place to set a novel. But I was also really interested in like thinking about what kind of person would choose to go and live in a house like that, where twice a day, every time the tide comes in, you're cut off. And you would have to really want to abandon yourself to the elements. So it was thinking about that sort of led me to the character, led me to the artist, to this woman and I was thinking, yes, an artist would be exactly the kind of person. She'd be attracted by the landscape, but she'd be attracted by the isolation, and she wants to go and live there and, you know, be free to live however she wants. So that island, it was really influential actually in the crafting of the book, in the plot, and actually in determining the characters too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm seeing, let me see if I can find it here. Oh, this is one of our questions too. Do you practice any art besides writing? Because your jargon about not just the painting, but also the pottery, and you talk about throwing, what was it? Throwing. I don't even remember what the term was now, but I was like, oh, I wondered if you were an artist as well, or if you've dabbled.
No, I have no visual artistic talent whatsoever. But I did do a lot of reading about art. I like art. I like looking at art. I like going to art galleries and that kind of thing. And I read, memoirs and biographies of female artists. And so, I did want to get that sort of feeling of the paint, and there's quite a specific language that people tend to use when they're talking about making visual art. And I did go and visit some pottery studios, and watch people working and watch the sort of rhythm of the, there is a kind of rhythm to making, to throwing pots and that kind of thing. But actually one of the really interesting things I found about pottery studios is they're full of like little implements that you could do people harm with, like funny little knives and sharp wires and things. So it was like, oh, this is interesting. So that was very inspirational.
Yes, I remember the sharp wire.
Yeah, and as I was reading A Familiar Name, artist came up to me. You mentioned Grant Wood and his Death on Ridge Road, and Grant Wood is from my neck of the woods here in Iowa, so of course I know who he is and his beautiful work. And so, do you have a favorite artist, or do you just enjoy?
I mean, there are a lot of artists that I admire. Actually, Georgia O'Keeffe was in my mind quite a lot when I was writing this. Not that the art is anything like it, but she was, of course, very inspired by bones and by skulls. And she painted those, she used animal bones a lot in her work. But actually, there's a particular Scottish artist called Joan Ardley. She's not particularly well known, but I did read quite a lot about her. And I looked at her work a lot when I was describing the paintings in this book. I was thinking a lot about those, about her landscapes and her paintings of the sea.
Yeah. I'd love to hear about your process, because this must have been a difficult book to write. You had so many different parts that were kind of woven together. So you had multiple points of view. You had snippets from Vanessa's diary. You had news reports. Did you write that just kind of like the way we read it from beginning to end, or did you piece it apart all together?
The diaries were kind of written separately. I mean, not entirely, but I wrote quite a lot of Vanessa's diary, and not all of it made it into the book. But I needed to write quite a lot for myself when I was getting to know her and figuring out her whole timeline and figuring out what she thought about things. And so that was sort of written separately, not before. I think I was going back and forth. I can never remember how exactly I did it, but the other bits, things like the news reports and so on, I did write it sort of as you read them. So weirdly, actually, this book was a real joy to write. I say weirdly because I struggled quite a lot with the two before, and I felt like it flowed actually more easily this time. I did really love writing it, which is not always true.
Yeah, every book is different, right? It brings its own set of challenges. So would you consider yourself a plotter where you plot everything out, or more of a pantser?
I'm somewhere in between.
Yeah.
I definitely don't like to have everything plotted out from the start. I don't even know how I could do that, because I figure quite a lot out while I'm actually in the thick of the writing, and that's when I feel like I have my best ideas. You start to see different connections between different characters, and make, ideas start to occur, and themes, start to come up again and again. So I'll have a point that I'm aiming for. Like, I know who done it, but I may not know exactly why or how it came about. But I need to have that point to aim for, and then I'll sort of write my way into the book. And then generally about halfway through, I need to take a step back, and that's when I'll maybe put some post-its on a wall or what have you. And then, because you need to look at the shape of the whole thing. I think there's a certain point where you feel like you're too close, and you've got to step back, and then it'll just be like chapter by chapter, and then I can see if one character's kind of disappeared for a long time and I need to write a bit more of them or something like that. You sort of balance it out. So I kind of plan halfway through.
A combo, yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think even the most hardcore plotters amongst us tend to, get some. You never know how a story or a character is going to be until you really get in there, and so you have to be a little flexible. I think even when you have a roadmap. Let's talk about Grace, because Grace was the one that was living in her home, right? And in the present day story. And we get a lot of the story about Vanessa through her memories, right? And what she chooses to remember and how she kind of frames her memories. And as as we know, recollections may vary. So tell us about Grace and how you kind of thought of her as a character.
Yeah, so Grace is this woman who's kind of Vanessa's friend, and she's a doctor who works in the local village, and she meets Vanessa when Vanessa falls and breaks her wrist, and Grace treats her and then sort of helps her out a bit. And so their friendship starts in that way. It starts with one person needing the other one, and all through their friendship, which endures for a couple of decades, there's this constant kind of shift in power dynamics as to who needs who wants who around, and generally it's Grace that wants Vanessa more than the other way around, although Vanessa is fond of her, but the relationship is just not nearly as important to Vanessa. So Vanessa is one of these people who attracts people all the time, and Grace is not. Grace struggles to make friends. She struggles to make connections. So this relationship with Vanessa is hugely important to her. And then after Vanessa's death, she becomes the executor of Vanessa's will. So she then has an element of control, not as much as she would like, but she's one of the people who really wants to be the person who sort of tells Vanessa's story, or who's somehow the guardian of Vanessa's story and Vanessa's memory. And this sets up a kind of another point of conflict between her and the curator of the museum that owns the sculpture, because he's an expert. He's a man called Becker. He's an expert in Vanessa's work, and he feels that he should be the one who tells the story of who Vanessa was. So there's this kind of conflict between them, although they are at time allies as well. But Grace was quite a tricky character because she doesn't actually know herself all that well, and she doesn't have a lot of self-knowledge. She's a very accomplished person. She's a good doctor. She functions perfectly well, but she has some issues when it comes to personal relationships.
Yeah, and we read that in a former life you were a financial journalist. How did you make that leap from journalism to fiction?
Well, I was extremely fortunate because I was approached when I was writing for a newspaper in London. I was approached by an agent who is still my agent, and she had sort of spotted a gap in the market. She wanted someone to write a kind of self-help book for women, a financial kind of self-help book. Mm-hmm. And she had read some of my stuff and she liked the way I wrote. And she said, "Oh, would you be interested in doing this?" So I said, "Yeah, great." And didn't really give it, I didn't realize what a great thing that was at the time, to just have an agent without even really, to get an agent without even really trying. And she turned out to be a brilliant agent. So I was doubly lucky. And then she encouraged me to write fiction. I admitted that I had some, ideas that I never sort of followed through on. And I would write things for myself, but never show them to anyone because I had no self-confidence in my fiction writing at all. But she really encouraged me. And it was through my agent that I got a kind of commission, a weird sort of ghostwriting commission to write a romantic comedy, which was, I was approached by a publisher through my agent. And they had an idea for this rom-com set against the backdrop of the global financial crisis. And they asked me if I would do it. And they gave me sort of 8 weeks to do it.
Oh my God.
Wow. It was kind of crazy. And so, and I did it. I think it took me slightly longer than 8 weeks, but so it was kind of this light, slightly, I'm not going to call it silly, but it was very light rom-com. And it did kind of okay. And then they asked me to do another one, and I continued, and I did 4 of these romantic comedies, which I wrote under a different name because the first one wasn't my idea. So I didn't really feel, it wouldn't have felt right to publish it under my name. But I was never comfortable doing romantic comedy. It didn't feel right to me. I kept introducing more and more jeopardy and more tragedy, and more terrible things kept happening to all the characters. And it was very clear that this was not a good fit. Mm-hmm. And eventually, the 4th one just didn't do well at all. And it became clear that I needed to do, I either needed to go back to journalism, get a real job, or try something else.
And we're so glad you did.
Yeah. And did you go straight from there into The Girl on the Train?
Well, yeah, I was very low at that point because obviously the last book had failed and I was kind of broke because it had taken me a long time to do that book. And then, if it doesn't sell, you're in trouble. And so I was a bit desperate, but I had some ideas for crime novels, and I'd been working on one that had this character in it who was a drunk, this woman who drank too much and couldn't remember what she did last night. And it was my agent once again who encouraged me, and she said, that character is a great character. You're onto something there. You've just got to find the way to tell the story. We used to refer to her as Drunk Girl. She was like, yeah, Drunk Girl is the one. You need to go for it. And so I came up with this idea that she would have this kind of rear window moment. That was the initial idea, that she would witness an act of violence. That was the first sort of Girl on the Train idea. And then I kind of decided, well, no, she didn't need to witness an act of violence because of who she was, because she was this fantasist, this incredibly unreliable person. She could witness anything and she could make it into something. And so that was so I put her on the train. And I had the idea that she was passing her ex-husband's house, and off she went.
So good.
And it worked.
Yeah, and how off she went.
Yeah. So great. So good.
All right. Well, I think we are at the giveaway part of our show. And now I don't know if this is me or you, Heather, but I'm going to go for it.
Okay.
Paula is giving away 1 copy of The Blue Hour to a lucky US viewer. Doesn't matter if you're watching us on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or anywhere else. We scour the comments everywhere we stream, but please make sure to shout out where you're from for a chance to win. Add the missing words to this title of one of Paula's books. And if you don't know this one, you haven't been paying attention at all. The Girl, ...
I think we'll get lots of right answers for that one, Kimberly. I think so. And the Killers, we're huge fans of independent booksellers and want to support them in any way that we are able, which is why we ask every author to tell us their favorite or one of their favorites. And Paula has chosen Valley Bookseller in Stillwater, Minnesota as her bookseller this week. Can you tell us a little bit about why?
I'm doing an event with them. And I don't live here, so I don't actually know that many small booksellers. But yeah, I'm doing an event with them this evening. So, and it's for my publication day. So I think that seems fitting.
Yes, and we can say that Valley Bookseller is a fantastic space, beautiful location in Stillwater, Minnesota, right along the, I think, LaCroix River there. It's beautiful. So people, if you get a chance to get out there, you need to do so. And we will drop the link to the Blue Hour in the comments so you can order it along with all of Paula's other books and any other books on your wish list.
All right, so obviously the killers love to read, and the Killer Author Club is the place to share the love for the books that you are reading and loving. Post pictures, write reviews, ask for recommendations, give yours, make our TBR cups runneth over. Paula, we want to ask you, what are you currently reading?
Oh, I am reading, I can show you actually, Guide Me Home by Attica Locke. Which is a fantastic kind of political thriller set in Texas. Attica Locke is a really great crime writer. I've read quite a few of hers. This is the third of a trilogy, and it's fantastic, and I highly recommend it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
And we have some other books to talk about, that recommendations tonight. Our first one is a one that we think you should add to your pile, and it's Leave the Girls Behind by Jacqueline Bublitz, which is out today. The acclaimed author of Before You, My Name returns with this fresh suspense novel about a woman haunted by a serial killer and the ghosts he left behind. And you can also check out The Trip. 4 friends are on the vacation of a lifetime in Thailand. Only one of them committed a crime, but all 4 know how to keep a secret, and they are all guilty of something. And we also finally have The Secrets of Lily Pond Lane, a twist.
That does it for tonight.
Sorry about that. Twisted thriller anthology about the dark secrets of a small town. So check all those out. And we will, and one of the authors is Manuela Lehman Billingsley, an active member of the Killer Author Club. So congratulations, Manuela. We are so excited for you and your crew in that book, and we know people will love it. Jacqueline is giving away 3 copies, Phoebe 2 copies, and Manuela and friends are giving away 1 paperback and 1 hardcover copy, all to lucky US viewers. So you know the drill. Drop a comment if you'd like to be entered for any or all of these books, and tell us where you're from. Good luck. And don't forget to check out our Killer's latest books.
That's right. Kara's latest, The Second Mrs. Strom, is set in Paris and has the tagline, "A successful marriage is built on lies." You will love it, and go ahead and pre-order the next in the series, What the Nanny Saw, out November 13th. And Heather's latest, Everyone is Watching, is Big Brother meets Clue in a reality show gone wrong.
And Paris is always a good idea, and so is Kimberly's The Paris Widow, about a dream vacation gone horribly wrong.
That's right.
Yeah. And we'll drop the links to all those in the comments as well. And as you know, membership has its privileges. So if you're on Facebook, check out our private members-only group called the Killer Author Club, where all the killer magic is found, like giveaways. And every episode, the Killer Author Club chooses a name from the hat to win a piece of swag: t-shirts, mugs, candles, totes, hats, water bottles, all of which can be found at killerauthorclub.com. And today's winner is, we have Krista Runke is our killer winner this time. So Krista, contact one of us and we will be sure to get that sent out to you soon.
Yeah. All right. So Paula, we have excellent news for you. You have survived the Killer Author Club. I know it was a close one. You did it.
It's been really fun. Thank you.
Please tell us where our listeners and viewers can find you.
Oh, online, I am paulahawkinsbooks.com, and that has details of events that I'm doing as well as all the books and
Love
links and the thing. Yeah.
All the socials, I'm sure we can get to there.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And that does it for tonight's episode. Thank you to everyone for tuning in, and make sure you mark your calendars for 2 weeks from today, November 12th at our usual time. Our very own Kara Ruda will be in the killer hot seat to tell us what the nanny saw. Just let me say, she saw a lot. So in the meantime, please find us wasting entirely too much time on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. And for all the information you need, times, upcoming schedule, past episodes, recipes, and merch, surf to killerauthorclub.com. Thank you for being part of the club. And thank you, Paula, so much for being here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks.
Good night.
That does it for tonight's show. Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to catch our next show live, we're every other Tuesday night on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For times, upcoming schedule, and to catch up on past episodes, visit us at killerauthorclub.com. Happy reading. Now get on out there and kill that TBR.